All right, my car enthusiast friends, let's talk about tickets, or rather how to avoid getting them. Now, as car enthusiasts, obviously, we like pushing the limit a little bit. We like enjoying our cars, especially on these beautiful, windy, twisty roads. And with that comes the chance of run-ins with the police. And the question is, how do we avoid that? How do we minimize the risk, maximize the reward, if you will? And I have 3 tips for you. So the first thing is being hyper vigilant. So you don't want to be speeding all the time. You want to be a little bit more selective and prudent with when you choose to push the limit. And this person is being nice. Thank you very much. And what I mean by that is, if I'm just driving normally around town, and let's say I'm in a state where going 5 over the limit is, usually fine, and you're not going to get any attention from cops for doing so, that's what I'll do. So in a 55, I'll be going around 60, like right now. But when I am pushing it, when I am going a little bit faster than 5 over the limit, or maybe a lot faster than 5 over the limit, I'm going to be much more vigilant as to what's going on around me. And that means being very attuned as to where cops could be hiding, especially if that's a road that I am comfortable with and know well, or just paying attention to cars in my rear view, out in the distance, that could be cops. And at least in the US, they're usually going to be Ford Explorers or Dodge Chargers. There are some exceptions, there are some unmarked vehicles, and I have had some close run-ins where I saw a guy next to me get pulled over by an unmarked car, and it was like a Jeep or something kind of random that I would not have expected to be a cop car. So I'm not saying that this will 100% eliminate risk, right? With all of these tactics, there's no way to push the car safely, of course, push the car on public roads and at speed while eliminating the risk completely of getting a ticket. So when I say being hyper vigilant and being able to see a cop at a distance, a big part of that comes down to being able to recognize various cars. And as a kid, I think the reason it kind of naturally occurred for me is, as a kid, I would be looking out the window, looking at cars, being just interested by the lights and the design and the shapes and whatever. So I'm able to quickly spot and identify a car at night or during the day, based on the light pattern, etc. But anyone can learn that skill. And there's even images, if you go on Google image search, that show you what cops look like in your rear view based on the light pattern, because there's where the ambers are based on the trim level for these various vehicles. That also does change. So that's tip number 1, is being hyper vigilant. So that comes down to, again, being able to identify a Crown Vic or a Dodge Charger or a Ford Explorer at distance, at night, or during the day, in any condition, as well as when you are pushing it, be very careful. Be attuned to where cops could be hiding. Now, before I get to point number 2, a lot of you may be thinking, hey, radar detector, obviously, duh. Well, I actually just bought my first radar detector recently. It's a Uniden R7. And the reason I have never gotten a radar detector before is that I'm concerned it might essentially give me a false sense of confidence. I might feel like, hey, because of the radar detector, I'm safe, and therefore I'm going to push it, and I'll be pushing it more often than I should, and as a result, I would get a ticket. Now, I've been driving since I was, 15 and a half? I'm now 31, so over 15 years, no moving violations, no speeding tickets. I mean, I've had a parking ticket here and there, but never been pulled over by a cop for a moving violation. And I plan on keeping it that way. So the radar detector is more for me to experiment, learn, teach you guys what I'm learning as well. But I think most tickets can totally be avoided just by being smart. So that brings me to point number 2, which is understand that the fun in driving is acceleration. And when I say acceleration, you're probably thinking just starting from a stop and going fast, accelerating in a straight velocity, going faster. But acceleration is any change in velocity, right? So angular acceleration is turning. Deceleration is also a form of acceleration, actually. So what I'm trying to get at is going fast in a straight line is kind of boring. If you're on a smooth highway going 120 miles an hour and you're not feeling anything, you're just on a straight, smooth, whatever road, nothing is actually that exciting about it, right? It might just, you're seeing you're seeing trees and stuff pass by you on the sides at speed, but what's much more enjoyable is when you're accelerating. So that means if the speed limit is 55, I can go from 0 to 55 and accelerate aggressively, but then I'm not going to exceed that speed, because again, the acceleration is the fun part, not the absolute speed, not the absolute velocity. So keeping that in mind, you can then pick and choose how you want to drive to maximize your enjoyment. The only time I will intentionally be speeding beyond the point where it's safe to do so and I might be, risking a ticket, is because I want to get from point A to point B faster. And I don't know if you guys watch my other channels, but I'm all about efficiency and being more productive and minimizing wasted time as a big foundational component of productivity. And for that reason, yeah, if I'm driving on a boring highway, sure, I'll push it because I want to get to the gym or get to wherever as quickly as possible. But when it's about enjoying the driving experience, it's about taking the turns at speed. It's about taking the turns for enjoyment rather than just going in a straight line. Because going in a straight line, not that fun. And then the third and final point is actually car selection. So again, if we're trying to optimize for car enjoyment, we're trying to optimize for driving enjoyment behind the wheel rather than just flexing on the plebs, if you will. And I think a lot of people, especially when they're younger and a little bit more focused on external forms of validation, we try to get the fastest, most expensive, most flashy car, and just to show people how successful we are. That's silly, right? That's nonsense. It is much more enjoyable to take a slow car and drive it fast rather than take a fast car and then be forced to drive it slow, where you can't even explore the limits. Because bringing a car out is the fun part. So if I'm driving a Porsche 911 Turbo and I can only go 5/10 or 3/10, that's not going to be as fun as going 9/10 in a Miata. I would take that Miata driving experience over the Porsche experience in terms of driving enjoyment on public roads. So I just got out of a Honda S2000, and I was telling the owner that this is such a beautiful, immaculately balanced car. It is near perfect except for the steering, and I talk a little bit about that in my S2000 review, which you can watch right here. But he brought up, I wish it had a little bit more power. And I said, you know what? I disagree, because I think that the car eggs you on to push, to rev it out, right? Because it has low torque and it revs to 8,200 RPM. A lot of that power is only at the higher revs, obviously. And essentially, by giving it too much power, you lose part of the balance, you lose part of the experience of being able to push the car as hard as you want and do so safely on city streets. Because if I'm on a racetrack, that's a different story. But on city streets, taking a slower car and driving it harder is going to be much more enjoyable than taking that fast car and then holding it back. I'm curious what you guys think. So again, those three main points is the first one, being very vigilant and selective with where you speed. Don't be speeding everywhere all the time. You're going to just vastly increase your risk and it's not worth it. Pick and choose when you want to drive aggressively. Number two is understand that acceleration is fun. So getting up to speed, decreasing speed, turning, that's the fun part, not the absolute velocity. And then the third part is taking a slower car and driving it aggressively rather than taking a fast car and holding it back. So those are my three main tips. Now beyond that, I am going to be installing this radar detector, and I'll let you guys know how that is. And when I get my new car, I will probably experiment with laser jammers as well. Obviously, you want to be careful with the legality in your locale. Where I live, it's legal and fine to do these things, but please make sure, before you guys do anything, that it is legal and it is fine for you to do so. I don't want you guys to get in trouble. And obviously, I am not endorsing driving recklessly or driving beyond the limits of the road or your car or yourself. This is for informational purposes only. But anyways, my friends, drive safe out there. Enjoy the drive. Much love, my friends, and I'll see you all in that next one.